Nobody tells you about the staff room. They tell you about the classroom, the curriculum, the behavior management strategies, the lesson planning, the parent communication, the data tracking. Nobody tells you that the most psychologically complex room in the entire school is not the one with the children in it. It is the one the children are never allowed to enter, the staff room, the place where the mask comes off, where 11 hours of professional composure gets quietly set down on a table next to a cold cup of coffee, where people who spend their entire working day holding other people's children together finally stop holding themselves together. I have been thinking about staff rooms for a long time. What happens in them? What doesn't happen in them? What people say? What people never say? What the silences between colleagues actually mean? And I want to talk about it honestly because nobody does. This is inside the staff room. Let me start with something uncomfortable. Most staff rooms are not safe spaces. I know that's not what we want to believe. We want to believe that the people who understand us most, who live the same hours, carry the same weight, absorb the same emotional complexity, would naturally create safety together. But that's not what usually happens. What usually happens is this: a small number of people set the emotional temperature of the room, and everyone else, consciously or not, adjusts to their thermostat to match. In some staff rooms, the temperature is cynicism, a low ambient cynicism. Nobody notices it anymore. It sounds like this: don't bother, nothing changes here. Wait until you have been here 5 years, you will stop caring too. That initiative, we did that in 2015. It did not work then either. It sounds like experience. It sounds like realism. It sounds like the kind of honesty that the naive optimism needs to hear. But it isn't. It's despair that has learned to dress itself as wisdom, and it is one of the most contagious psychological forces in any school building. But here is what happens to the newly qualified teacher who walks into the staff room in September full of genuine energy, carrying a real belief that they can make a difference. Within 6 months, if the temperature is cynicism, they will begin to match. Not because they are weak, because humans are neurologically wired to synchronize with the emotional environment they inhabit. It is a survival mechanism. Standing emotionally apart from your social group costs enormous energy. Most people eventually cannot afford it. So they join slowly, quietly. They learn the language. They start leaving sentences unfinished in the same knowing way. They start sighing in the right places. And one day they hear themselves saying the words, don't bother, nothing changes here. And they don't even notice they have said them. That is what a cynical staff room does to a person in a year. Imagine what it does in 10. Now, let me tell you about the characters because every staff room has them, and you already know exactly who I am talking about. There is the veteran, 20, 25, 30 years. They have outlasted seven head teachers, four government initiatives, and two complete curriculum overhauls. They carry institutional memory that is genuinely irreplaceable. They know which parents to call first, which children need feeding before they can learn, which rooms have broken heating that nobody has fixed since 2009. The veteran is indispensable and veteran knows it. Is what the veteran does with that knowledge. Some veterans are extraordinary. They are the quiet anchor of the school. They share what they know freely. They buffer new teachers from the worst to the system's shocks. They have made their peace with what education is and what it isn't. And they bring a kind of grounded acceptance that a staff room desperately needs. But some veterans, and I say this with full understanding of what the profession has done to them, have curdled. They are not malicious, but they are territorial, quietly, consistently territorial. New idea proposed in a meeting, the veteran raises eyebrow, one eyebrow, the whole room shifts. Young teacher trying something different, the veteran doesn't attack. They simply wait. And when, as inevitably happens, sometimes it doesn't work immediately, the veteran says nothing. The silence says everything. This is power, exercised without accountability, and it shapes schools more than most leadership decisions ever will. There is the performer. The performer is always fine, magnificently, exhaustingly, suspiciously fine. They walk into the staff room with energy that doesn't match the hour or the workload. They laugh loudly, they deflect with humor every time the conversation gets close to something real. They organize the socials. They bring cake on Fridays. They are the first to volunteer for the awkward assembly. And everyone loves the performer, or they think they do. What they actually love is what the performer gives them, which is permission to not feel the wait for a few minutes. But here is what nobody in that staff room is asking: who performs for the performer? Who checks on the person whose entire identity in that building is being the one who doesn't need checking on? The performer is statistically, predictably, heartbreakingly one of the highest risk people in the building, because the gap between the performance and the reality underneath it can only grow so wide before something gives. And when it gives, everyone is shocked because they only ever watch the show. There is the invisible now. You might have to think for a moment to remember their name. That is exactly my point is. They arrive, they work, they leave. They do not eat lunch in the staff room. They do not attend the social events. They respond to emails promptly and professionally and say almost nothing in meetings. The invisible one is read by most school as content. Low maintenance, uncomplicated. The invisible one is almost never content. Invisibility in a social system is almost always a protection strategy. It develops in people who have learned through experience in this workplace or another, in this life or another. That being seen leads to being hurt. That contributing leads to being dismissed. That asking for things leads to being seen as a problem. So they make themselves small, professionally competent, and personally absent. And the school, busy and overwhelmed and grateful for anyone who doesn't add to the noise, lets them, until the day the invisible one hands in their resignation. And the staff room is quietly bewildered because they never seemed unhappy. They never complained. They seemed absolutely fine. They were not fine. They were just very, very good at not being noticed. There is the one I want to spend the most time on because this character is the one most misunderstood and the most damaging when mishandled. Now comes the difficult one. The difficult one asks questions in meetings that nobody else is asking, pushes back on decisions that everyone else has silently accepted, names things that the room would prefer to leave unnamed, advocates loudly for staff or students in ways that make senior leader uncomfortable. And the label difficult gets applied. It becomes the lens through which every subsequent behavior is interpreted. Now, here is the question I want you to sit with. What if difficult is not a personality type? What if difficult is what integrity sounds like in a system that has decided compliance is safer? I have worked with, spoken to, and listened to hundreds of educators across different schools and systems. And the pattern is remarkably consistent. The people labeled difficult are very frequently the people with the most accurate read of what is actually happening in the school. They are not always right. They are not always fair. They do not always communicate their concerns skillfully, but they are underneath the label, beneath the friction, usually pointing at something real. The question for leaders is this: when you call someone difficult, are you describing their behavior or are you describing your discomfort with what they are saying? Because those are not the same thing, and which one it is determines everything. Now, let me talk about what the staff room never talks about: the grief. Teaching involves a specific, compound, largely unacknowledged grief. It is the grief of watching a child you poured yourself into leave at the end of the year and wondering whether it was enough. It is the grief of a class you loved, dissolved in July, scattered into different classrooms, gone. It is the grief of the child who was there every day for 2 years and then one morning wasn't, and you don't know why, and nobody tells you this. It is the grief of a career that asks you to form deep, genuine human connections and then structurally prevents those connections from being sustained. Most teachers carry years of this grief without naming it, without ever once sitting in that staff room and saying out loud, I miss the children I have taught. I grieve the ones I could not reach. I carry the ones I failed, even when the failure wasn't mine. Because the staff room doesn't have language for that. It has language for frustration, for dark humor, for complaint, for exhaustion. It does not have language for the quiet love that is the actual foundation of the whole enterprise. And until it does, until the staff room becomes a place where that love can be spoken out loud without embarrassment or professional risk, we will keep losing the people who have most of it. I want to end this first episode of Inside the Staffroom with something direct. If you are a school leader watching this, your staff room is a clinical indicator. The health of that room tells you more about your school than any data dashboard ever will. Walk in it, sit in it, not to observe, not to be seen, just to listen to what it sounds like when it doesn't know you are listening, not through CCTV. If you are a teacher watching this, I want you to think about what character you have become in your staff room, not the character you perform, the one that formed over time, shaped by things that happened to you in that building and before it. Do you like who you have become in that room? Because you are allowed to choose differently, even now, even this term. And if you are the invisible one, if you are the person who has made themselves so small in that building that some days you wonder if you exist there at all. I see you, I know you are there. And I think the staff room needs you to take up more space, not less. Because the people who go quiet in broken systems are very often the people those systems most need to hear. Next episode of Inside the Staff Room, we are going into the meeting room, the place where decisions about teachers are made without teachers being involved, where language is used to avoid truth, where the phrase moving forward means we are never discussing what went wrong. That's next. And it's going to be one of the most important conversation we have had on this channel. If this episode meant something to you, share it with someone in your staff room, not to start a conversation, just to let them know that someone somewhere finally said it loud. That's always been enough.